there's a declassified CIA document that was written about a Hitler sighting in Colombia, and a picture taken. And apparently the CIA agent was a pretty higher up respected guy, and which is why it was filed. And there's an actual picture of Hitler in 1963, because apparently they got him out. I never really believed that until I read this. Actually, I never really believed they got Hitler out. But it's fascinating. The CIA actually has a letter from one of their agents. And so this was declassified. These documents were declassified in October of 2017. And they contained a new batch of documents about the Kennedy conspiracy assassination, and included, I don't think they realized, reports of Hitler visiting Colombia and Argentina. And the reports in one document, a former Nazi SS stormtrooper confirmed he reported having met with Hitler while visiting Colombia in 1955. Welcome to Fire with Faust, everybody. I am Faust Chicho. Thank you for joining us tonight on episode 7 of Believers vs. Skeptics, the truth about Antarctica. We are about to go at it, and I am joined once again by my semi-worthy adversary, sometimes worthy, who is dressed.
Oh, Fred just got back.
In his
Antarctica was crazy, man. I have the truth. Think I'm fucking around here?
He went to get it. He had to go get it.
I had to go get the truth. These people don't know what I've been through for this information, Faust. The snow, the pain, the frostbite, the avalanches. No aliens.
Nothing, right? You didn't see anything? I didn't know you were coming. So
unfortunately.
They're a few miles underground, Yeah, so Antarctica I think everyone should be curious about Antarctica. It's such a huge continent, and it's covered by ice. And it's just a lot of very fascinating things that have gone on. I know I was always curious about Antarctica and what was there, what was hiding there, because you hear a lot of stuff, which Nick is going to attempt to show that a lot of it is total conspiracy and untrue, unsubstantiated, and I'm going to attempt to lay out a lot of research that I did, which showcases just how far back we've been going to Antarctica, and a lot of the stuff that happened in World War II and after World War II. And what Antarctica is basically home base for right now today, which the effect that this has had on the globe and Western civilization as we know it, and all civilization that we on Earth, it is profound. It's not a small thing. So that we're talking about, because there's a lot under the ice in Antarctica. So that being said, what we're going to do before we go into it, I'm going to lay out a timeline, and I'm going to give Nick a chance to speak to that timeline when he has something to say. We're going to do our absolute best not to interrupt each other and keep our cool. We all have tasty beverages just because it is happy hour,
This is the best beer in the world.
Cheers, brother.
And you also cheers.
And I'm going to share with you some of the recent, some more recent things, that I discovered, there's a 2017 Australian and New Zealand study. The scientists discovered the existence of these large natural caverns in Antarctica thermally heated by adjacent volcanoes. And
True.
they knew there was volcanoes there, but they had no idea how many there was. So there's an article in Business Insider Australia, and they wrote about their findings. But it's one of the estimates put it like at a balmy 77 degrees Fahrenheit in some of those places in Antarctica due to the thermal heating. And that was a 2017 study.
I saw that, Faust. I even saw they said that in Antarctica, in these caverns, you would be comfortable just wearing your t-shirt. Like, it's actually, which blew my mind. Like, I didn't believe it for a second, but no, this is legitimate scientific fact.
I was pretty blown away by it too, because of course I was always imagining that I'm sure the technology is advanced there, but I'm just saying this first because this just supports the notion that there could very well be, and it wouldn't be a stretch of, it wouldn't even need to be a stretch of technology that we're not familiar with to make it hospitable in many parts, particularly on the western side of Antarctica. Something like, in addition to the 41 previously found volcanoes, these are active volcanoes. There's now a total of 91 that previously unknown. 91 added to the 47. That's
138. That's right.
It makes it quietly, because I didn't really remember seeing this as like breaking news. Everything about Antarctica is kept secret, as you're going to see. It makes it the most active volcanic region on the planet.
It does.
Second to none. So it's not that big of a stretch, at least, as far as what the conditions might be if you could get under the ice. So that being said, in order to talk about Antarctica, we have to go back to the early 1900s. There is a particular country very interested in Antarctica, and many of you who are tuning in probably have a little bit of idea who that is. Germany, of course. And I, Nick, I can't remember if I'm saying this right. Is it how do the Germans say Thule? Is it TH?
I think it, at least in my head when I was reading it, I pronounced it Thule. Thule.
Yeah, Thule. The Thule Society was the name of, and so the Thule Society in the early first decade and 2 decades of the 1900s in Germany was a lot of the money, a lot of the the bougie class, and they were the ones who let's see, like it was February 24th, 1920. The Thule Society leaders believed that if they could control the New Workers' Party from behind the scenes, they could create a new German nation. But they believed in metaphysical principles, and out of the ashes of World War I, their emblem was the first version of the swastika, of which, if you know anything about where the swastika comes from, it has these Tibetan roots. It's very, it's a very.
That's where the swastika comes from. Like Hitler took it originally from their original logo, or was inspired by.
From the Thule, yeah.
Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah, I was shocked because I thought, I didn't realize it was it makes sense because when you learn about the swastika, you learn about the metaphysical origins of it. I mean, Hitler he perverted it in more ways than one, but that's where it comes from. And I'll show you guys a picture of that later, but it's fascinating to see the kind of power they had,
And really quick for all our listeners, I highly suggest everyone to look into Hitler's connection with the occult in general. In doing research for this episode, I discovered that the Thule Society, their believers and like the strong belief in the occult in Germany across the board was a big reason for his rise to power. I think people watching this will find that super fascinating.
Yeah, particularly since Hitler would have gone on to outlaw all secret societies.
Yeah.
When he came into, true, like real the biggest power, and then also into the world, into the world war that he got them in. It was, and he made them all legal. So interestingly enough, the Thule Society and which they were not secret, they didn't have to go into or like make an official corporate name like the Vril Society did, which is fascinating that this is on record. But so it's worth noting that the Thule Society believed in the existence of an advanced far northern subterranean civilization called Hyperborea. I think that's the way you pronounce it. Which is, that goes back to the Romans and a lot of the mythology around giants and,
Early
Greek and Roman
schizophrenia.
legend, right? The Thule Society members believed that they believed that the Hyperboreans were racial progenitors of the Aryan race. Okay, this is part of the birthplace of the white supremacy, neo-Nazi genetics modification, whatever. This is where a lot of it comes from. It's a lot of confusion, I think, but the Hyperborean civilization could harness Vril energy, right? And Vril energy, they thought, was essential for futuristic technologies that were created by ancient civilizations. Now, there's a lot of megalithic structures still standing that we have a lot of questions about how they could have come to be. So we know there's technology that's been lost. I think that's pretty accepted. And I think that the Thule Society was onto a lot of that. But interestingly enough, they had the money, and they were kind of funding a lot of and shaping society behind the scenes in a lot of ways. So they believed in this, right? So from there, we're going to get into the Vril, because the Vril Society and Maria Orsic and her, I don't know what you want to call that group of women she was noted to hang out with. They come into play soon, but I found some records that the Nazi expeditions to Antarctica began as early as 1913, and that they were getting more and more familiar with Antarctica and the way to get there. Even before the lead up to the war, before we started to allegedly track them on our radar, the submarines, I mean.
You're completely right.
And it's just like fast. Like, what do you do? Like, because I'm always like, whose freaking idea was it to go to Antarctica? I mean, it's like freaking, it's frigid. It's
Faust,
it's crazy.
Let me explain this. I have your answer. You've laughed at me when I've said this before, but the reason the Germans went into Antarctica, believe it or not, was margarine. Yes. What? Margarine, the sweet, succulent, buttery substance that lines your bread. Margarine, yes. No, I mean, not only margarine. So it's really interesting. The reason that all of this started was the German oil industry, or specifically the whaling industry of Germany. Did you know that at the time, Germany, I think, was one of the world's top consumers in margarine? At the same time, lubricants, glycerin, oil, all of that was coming from whaling. And actually, hold on, I have the stat right here. 492,000 barrels of oil were collected in the whaling season of 1938 to 1939. So here's what happened. At the time, they were whaling near, I believe the Latin America, region of the Arctic. The British come in and they're like, hey, you guys now have to pay additional taxes if you want to whale here. We're claiming this territory. So the Germans are like, oh shit, okay, that's going to hurt our economy. Let's try to look up there. So they go into Norway's waters. Norway at the time had kind of claimed that water and said, hey, we're going to whale here. But at the same time, there wasn't any official decree, I think, until 20, 30 years later. So they were cool. They kind of decided to explore that area. They did surveillance. They sent their planes over. But the goal was just to establish a whaling station. They just wanted margarine.
There's a lot of products they made from the whales.
Oil. Yeah, there's a lot of products. But that was the primary goal. So something that I will credit you for here is it was explicitly stated that for that operation, a secondary objective was continuing the scientific experiments that happened in that 1908 or 1913 expedition you were just mentioning. Specifically, what they were studying there was they were studying the meteorological
Yeah.
And magnetic forces of that Arctic region. They were drilling like 30-meter holes into the icebergs, observing temperatures and ice stuff. And they were just kind of figuring out the land. And that was for a military purpose. So it was Hermann Göring, who was the head of the German legislature at the time. He's one of the most important people in the Nazi party, actually. He thought, okay, we need to understand the Arctic region because eventually we're going to go to war with the Russians. And the best way to train is to be in this Arctic region. He sent them over there to continue those experiments, better understand the region, and prepare for the ultimate war in the air, especially with the Russians in the frost. So from what I understand, that was the reason.
I'm sure that, I mean, look, that makes sense to me, and that's a good find that you discovered. It doesn't surprise me. I'm sure part of the reason why they were going was for that as well. But it's just interesting to note that the expeditions began as early as 1913, and this is also when the Thule Society and the Vril, and then eventually the Black Sun, these secret societies. There's a whole litany of them, which, we're not going to get into too much on this, but some fascinating names.
Oh, we will.
Right around this time, right? But by 1938, 1939, that's when extensive portions of the Arctic were being claimed, on behalf of the Nazi government. And this was worrisome to, some of us across the pond who were like, the hell are they doing down there? Should we be concerned? We should probably be concerned. We know they were going there often enough to where they were getting a lot of people's attention. Captain Alfred Richter. I don't know. I'm not very good with German.
No, yeah, that's right.
When the aircraft carrier was Schwabenland, and he sent planes to perform extensive aerial surveillance. And that region was claimed by Nazi Germany, and it was called New Schwabenland. And there was many goals of the Schwabenland expedition. I'm sure many were classified, and many were, what they told people. But the establishment of Nazi Antarctic bases became a cause of concern for President Roosevelt. Now that's a fact because he gave orders for a military expedition to challenge the Nazi presence in parts of Antarctica that he deemed to be part of the Western Hemisphere. And that was reported in the New York Times on July 7th of 1939. So it's not like, speculated. Speculated. What was speculated?
The New York Times speculated that was his intention. It was never confirmed.
Okay, well, this is the New York Times wrote, and I quote, President Roosevelt moved today to prevent possible extension of Germany's claims to Antarctic areas into the Western Hemisphere by directing Rear Admiral Richard E. Byrd to leave in October to territory within the sphere of influence of the Monroe Doctrine. It is apparent that this government was prepared to take the position, if necessary, that any attempts by foreign powers to establish bases west of the 180th meridian in the Antarctic would be considered an unfriendly act. That was exactly what was written in the New York Times.
And I agree with you,
Faust. Seems pretty clear.
it is clear, more or less. So my point is that I think they got the part right where they were worried about some kind of war. Let's not assume who it was. They were worried about something attacking in the Arctic region. Who's to say if it was the Germans? So the Germany base and the speculation of that establishment, I believe the latest or the closest to the doctrine he made in 1947 was in 1945 when they spotted the German U-boats around that territory. And from what I understand, a year and a half later, it just doesn't seem like that much of a big deal for me. Because if if Germany establishes these bases, everyone finds out in like June or October, August 1945. Why would it take 2 years for him to say, hey, this is an emergency, let's start a war? From what I understand, it was because he was worried about Russians. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't know.
It's a great question. I read a lot of different reasons as to why there was a delay. And I think some of it had to do with how harsh the weather was. And there was a lot of things going on. I think a lot of different reasons. But,
okay,
we'll get back to that. But, during the war itself, there was a lot of submarine activity. Now, I don't have the radar. I can't show you, but I know that it was reported by both British and American military that they were tracking the U-boats, fucking going to and fro, the polar region of the Antarctica and South America, and they were like, what, it was very suspicious.
Unless you're a whaler.
And I guess unless you're a whaler, but as far as military goes, they were very curious about what was going on.
It is very important to mention for our audience that during this time in the world, I believe that Germany and Argentina and Chile were all allies at this point in the world. And the point or the specific area where these U-boats were found was in that Argentinian, Chilean region. So it was weird, like it was suspicious, but at the same time, it wasn't out of the ordinary, like completely,
Yeah, no, it was listen, Germany had massive corporate contacts in South America, at the time. So we knew that something was up. And we knew it was suspicious, but we didn't really know the extent of it. That would, I think, come out later, depending on who you ask. But so there was apparently there's a comment that was made by a Nazi commander of a submarine fleet, Admiral Karl Donitz in 1943, and the claim was that his fleet had built, quote, in another part of the world, a Shangri-La land of impregnable fortress, an impregnable fortress, which is just a strange mythological kind of reference for this admiral to make, right? Admiral Karl Donitz, right? He said that, and he said a few other things, but
and for everyone, it's important to note that Donitz is the one who took over for Hitler as the president after Hitler vanished. So his testimony is actually very important, and I cannot dispute what Faust is about to say in any way, because I've researched it and I couldn't find a way to dispute it.
Yeah, so he's after Germany's unconditional surrender on May 8th, 1945. Nazi submarine activity in the Antarctic region continued, and everyone was like, what? I'm sure, they were scratching their heads. And that was evidenced by a report in the, I don't know how to say this in France, the Agence France Presse on September 25th, 1946. And translated that report. I'm going to show you a picture of that. It's simply stated the continuous rumors about German U-boat activity in the region of Tierra del Fuego, or Fuerland in German, as they were calling it, between the southernmost tip of Latin America and the continent of Antarctica, are based on true happenings. That was the comment made in the paper about it. And I have a picture of that article for those of you who speak and read French, which we'll check that out when we get into the screen sharing, because I want to also introduce some testimony that backs up what I'm saying in a more modern format with some modern media. But basically, that this part of the timeline, I'm going to show you what has come out that supports all of these things in a surprising way. And and then we'll get into the infamous Operation Highjump, which
Let's do it.
I'm sure many of you guys are tuning in to learn a little more about Operation Highjump, and
they're here to learn the truth, Faust.
Media. But let me share my screen here. How do I do that on? Okay, share screen.
Show me the lies, Faust. Show them to me.
Okay, I never did this before on the other side. This site will be able to see the content.
Show me the lies.
We want to do entire screen. Yeah.
I don't need the entire screen. I just need the truth.
Chrome tab window, entire screen. Yeah, entire screen, right?
The entire truth.
And share system audio. Okay. I don't know what I just did. I just pressed share.
You're distracting them. You have nothing.
It won't work. Shit. Oh, that's one. I guess this is not the best way to do this, but let's see if I can. Oh, yeah, I can go right. So that's an original. These are instructions. Let me see if I can zoom in. These are instructions in German for the U-boats for their approach to Neuschwabenland, which was the name of the thing. This is what the maps look like, which were recovered. These are specific directions that the U-boats, so that they don't, to get under the ice, that were discovered. Oh, that not this is a letter, but let's go back to. So this is a translation. Very very interesting, and the.
Can I comment on this as well, Faust?
Sure.
All right, my friends, let's get into it. So, let's start out with the fact that these U-boats were not made to go anywhere deeper than 300 meters. As you see, the first direction says 500 meters. Then let's dive into it further. It gives very arbitrary instructions, like you need to position your U-boat this way at this angle for 20 minutes, and then go this way and this way. Let's just assume that if you followed these coordinates exactly, you would somehow end up in like a stream of time and space that led you into this new world they're proposing, right?
These are pretty specific, Nick.
They're very specific, yeah, but I could tell people to dive into their toilet and head down 5 meters, and that doesn't mean I'm right necessarily, right? And so something more interesting that I'd love for everyone to look into, I didn't have it prepped for this conversation, but I can lead all of you to it. If you look into this document right there, specifically that font, Rorte for das Passieren de Mertesifen, that font was invented 3 years after the invention of this supposed document. If you look into the font, and if you look at documents at this exact same time period and look for this font, you won't find it. It was used like 3 or 4 years later in German documents. And that was like the biggest evidence I found that this is fake. I wouldn't consider it conclusive evidence. Faust may as well be right here. I just found the document itself a little bit suspicious and a lot of inconsistent material. There's like 14 or something spelling errors in it for such an important document, but who knows? That right there, that picture looks weird to me. I cannot disprove that someone created these and put them on a giant realistic piece of paper. I don't know the reason for it, but they did.
I hear you. And interestingly, so those two pictures, you see what I'm pointing at, Liberia and Asgard. It's just, there's a lot of detail for these. And on this old looking paper, which I believe appears to be slightly acidic, being a comic book collector, even your white cardboard will get acidic, when you collect things of paper. It only takes 10 years, and then
you have comic books from the 40s?
I think my oldest one is from the 40s, yeah.
And tell me it's way more yellow than this.
Well, it's been preserved. I'm assuming these have been preserved.
He's touching it with his oily fingers right there.
He definitely is. He definitely is. So there's that, right? And I read about the U-boat and about the depth, but it was a lot to get into.
Yeah, it got
And
very engineering heavy.
it did, and so I didn't get stuck in it because I had a lot of information to go through. But I just wanted to share some of those pictures with you guys. Let's see.
And I definitely couldn't disprove it, everyone, beyond just like thinking about it in a common sense way. I definitely couldn't disprove the credibility or even find credibility for the source. My only reason for thinking it was fake was just that the spelling errors and the reason that the depth it stated wasn't the depth that the actual submarine could sustain. But who knows? Because it might
Yeah,
have been made for a future point in history. It's very hard to say.
it could have also been those U-boats could have specifically been made slightly, of a different kind. I think. I don't know. Like
Mysteries were made by liars.
I don't know. Just interesting, very very interesting. 1941.
Deceptive.
Anyway,
Dangerous.
what else do I got from this? Oh, the not that. Where is it?
Oh, I see Asgard map. Did you find Thor?
I found Thor, and he's look at that.
Mm,
Neuschwaben,
I did
Asgard.
not take you for a man
So
who
many
marked
German
his
names.
swastikas, Faust, but
I was hoping that I had that other picture in here of the swastika, but I don't. But I have it here. I
you were
forgot.
hoping for it?
There it. Here it
Wow,
is.
I misjudged you.
Shut up. Wait. Where did it go? Oh, so there's the original Thule Society, and there's the swastika. So you can see that it was
Pretty crazy.
a direct descendant of it. I was surprised by that. That's
I'm more
pretty
so
interesting.
surprised who in the Thule Society went, hey, look at that Buddhist thing. Let's make
Yeah.
it evil.
So, I want to jump into, because we're talking about um, radar and location, the locations. Well, let's just. I'm going to stop sharing just for a second, because I want to preface what I'm going to say next, before we jump into it. You know, the so the whole picture that has that I've come to see, the mosaic that I've learned was that these certain technologies were being developed. However they were being developed is up for a lot of question, and there's a lot of things that are like, wait, what? With Maria Orsic and the Vril Society being funded by the Thule Society, and apparently she was in telepathic exchange with people who lived in the sub-Antarctic region, under the ice. And apparently she was given plans which she brought to some very famous and well recognized scientists at the time, who began to put them together. And that's where the famous the German the Bell, the program, it came from them. But here's the thing: they were never hip to Hitler's plan. They liked him because he was a nationalist. They thought he could revive the economy. Hitler found out what they were doing and was like, "Great, we can make weapons out of it." And they were like, "No, we got to get it the hell out of here." They didn't want it. They didn't want it to have anything to do with that. When it started to become clear what they were onto and how far advanced it was, they started to make arrangements to get the hell out of Dodge, because it was clear Hitler was going to take them to war. And so there was, from what I've researched, there was kind of an exodus that happened. The technology and the Thule Society, Maria Orsic and the Vril, and what became of the Black Sun Society, they all went to Antarctica, and apparently they were welcomed. So this is also backed up by whistleblower testimony. And what I have to say about that is, circumstantial evidence is admissible in courts. right? Where direct evidence is lacking, circumstantial evidence together with eyewitness testimony can be sufficient enough to convince, a jury of innocence or guilt in a court of law. So because we're talking about things that happened, 100 years ago, and we have to depend on, when lacking physical evidence, eyewitness testimony and circumstantial evidence. So I just want to put that out there because there's a lot of whistleblowers who say things, and I'm going to show you some footage of them, and you're going to have to make up your mind about what you're hearing, and you can consider their motivations, what they may be selling. But I'm showing you people who I believe in my heart, after listening, are sincere. They're not reading from a script. I'm an actor. I know exactly what it's like to regurgitate something that you've memorized, make it your own, and then what it's like to read something. It's just a different animal, And when you speak from memory, you speak from experience, you do certain things that can't really be replicated even by the best of actors.
Faust, before you show them this stuff, let me stop for a second.
Okay.
And let me destroy you, my friend. I want to bring something up for our audience that I'm not sure whether it came up in Faust's research. But I discovered something. I discovered a smoking gun, everybody. And that is that this Vril Society that Faust is mentioning, do you guys know where it came from? Do you guys know where the Vril Society came from? It came from a science fiction book. Yes, a science fiction book. It started out as a story from, let's see, what was his name? His name was... I forgot. The name of the book was Vril. Yeah, it was about a German rocket scientist and science fiction. Oh, the author's name, Willy Ley. He came to the U.S. and wrote a book called Wahrheit. I cannot pronounce that in German. Society for Truth is the English name. It was about a society called the Vril that descended from the Aryans, and that someone goes deep underground in the Arctic region to find these aliens. And you know what happened? Two French writers, who are actually a big reason for a lot of what we're about to talk about today, took that theory, put it into their book, and then got cited multiple times, and the whole theory about the Vril Society came to be. But it's a lie.
Yeah,
it's a lie from science fiction.
That's I can't say that that's
the Vril Society is real.
But the Vril is basically another word for the Force. It's chi. Yeah. It's it's one of a long list of words that people use to describe the energy and the power of like the life force energy that can be harnessed, right? They call it the Force in Star Wars. They call it chi, in some cultures.
They call it bullshit in English.
Apparently, this dude wrote about the Vril, and these people fell in love with it. I'm not going to argue that point. I think
I just had to bring it up. I needed to let our audience know where this came from.
It's worth noting. You're right. But so I want to show you guys. I'm gonna share my screen again. And I think what I want to show you first is, since this is still fresh, or since we're talking about Vril, maybe I'll go right. Let's give you guys a Vril. Now the guy I'm going to show you, his name is William Tompkins. He's a whistleblower. He's passed on now. Before he died, he was in his 80s at the time. This guy had a crazy career in the Navy, 50-year career in the aerospace industry, worked for almost every single one, spent most of his time at TRW, I think. It's a huge think tank. I mean,
Believed the world and every war was started by reptilians. Believed his co-workers and secretaries were a Nordic race of aliens preventing the human.
So you're going to hear him say that. You're going to hear him.
Pretty credible guy.
Let me share my screen. And you can kind of gauge for yourself where he's at and what he's saying. But a lot of the stuff that he's saying supports, what people have. Well, maybe that too, but the reports that have come out about Antarctica, the technology, the Vril. So I'm going to show you a clip. Maybe we'll just start with the Vril since we're fresh on the topic.
Do it. It's
but then
Vril. It's Vril.
I also want to mention that the Black Sun is an offshoot of the Vril, which is kind of more related to the Nazis, and we'll get into that because you're going to see where that shows up apparently in Antarctica when I show you the other testimony that I got. So share screen. I know how to do this now.
This is the reptilian guy.
Yeah, this is the reptilian guy. Share system audio. I'm going to do the clap for our editor. So when she puts this together, so share. Okay, I'm sharing the screen now. Ooh, look at that. We're right here. Okay. Before I press play.
Who is this wench, Faust?
That is Maria Orsic. Okay, so for our glorious editor, whoever they may be, here we go.
So we had a young girl, Nordic, just outside of Germany. Some people talked to her, and they said, you are now involved in a new program, and you're going to have great support in this program. She had developed I think she had 8 girls. They were continually talked to telepathically to go and design spaceships. The little blonde actually built them, and eventually 2 of those got over here in Area 51. But Germany found out about the blonde, took her over, stopped everything, and then got to this point where there was some sort of pressurized program by the SS to control that original group. Now, several times they did work together, but Hitler allowed them to operate independently of the whole SS program, the whole development. So we had 2 developments going on in Germany. The girls didn't want their vehicles to be used for anything else but travel. They were afraid that somebody would get a hold of it and they use it for military, which is, of course, what they got. But the girls finally ended up in Antarctica in the large facilities. In fact, the reptilians had 3 massive caverns. They let Germany use 2 small ones. But when you're talking about small, it's like as big as California. And so there's cities in both the extraterrestrial caverns and manufacturing everything that you would need on a planet. So then Hitler's group did the same thing. 4 years before the war was over, it was decided that the war could possibly be lost, but if we win it, we still need to get out of the area because the Allies are going to bomb us off of the Earth and there won't be anything here left for us. So they decided to move everything to Antarctica. Admiral Byrd, they're going to down there and they were going to take out the whole thing in 1 week. The top people in every area of the Navy, best aircraft, best ships, best weapons, everything. And 5 weeks later, things didn't look very good. When we got down there, they had decided they were going to have one thrust from the west side of Antarctica and then the opposite side,
Apparently, some of these
coming
pictures are
into both of
from
them towards the
upwards.
center of the continent. And so before we even got all the guys around, and I'm talking about big 4-engine flying boats, okay, and ships, battleships and destroyers and submarines and you name it. Before they got there, these fairly large, they were 100-foot diameter saucers, came up out of the ocean and took down everything.
Now look at that.
Now there's a misnomer on some documentations.
These are real videos.
Pictures of the photographs of
These aren't
some of the
photographs.
German UFOs. Many of
No.
the close-ups give you a real clear picture of the cross link. What was
That's a real photo.
partially incorrect in
That's a real
that
photo.
information that's been released was that not all of the vehicles
What is that?
out from the German side to take out ours, but
What?
from the large caverns on the adjacent to them, unmarked UFOs and unmarked cigars came up, which then it was a joint venture
So
by the extraterrestrials that lived there, operated from there,
that's what they
and built the
ascertained.
vehicles that went to the moon and Mars and all these other places.
So
But
we're gonna pause. We're gonna pause that, right? Because I want what I want you to hear. So I want you to take note of what you saw. This is just a 2-minute thing. That flying saucer was called the Hanubu, right? And it was a design that we got the plans for. It's a flying saucer that I have seen personally.
You've seen it personally?
No, not that I've seen personally. It's a saucer that I've heard almost 7, and because it's still there, because it's confiscated and was put into Area 51, which is not exactly Area 51 is the name of the area, but it's still there in the hangar, and there's been multiple reports from people who saw it. And I just want to show you that because I have the schematics right here, and this is Tompkins talking about that, and you're going to hear him say something, and I'm going to show you how this other CIA agent
1942, the war's on. Rick Ubata, his hobby is sending these Navy operatives into Germany. They've been going all over Germany, and they're staggered at what they've found. They found that Hitler and the SS made an agreement with reptilian extraterrestrials. They found hundreds of different types of advanced weapons being built. These included 60-foot and 250-foot, 500-foot UFOs, round vehicles, okay, UFOs. They built some of these out of chromoly steel that would weigh tons and tons and tons. They had developed, or they had been given, electromagnetic anti-gravitational propulsion by the reptilians. The agreement turned out that they were to develop a parallel space navy that the reptilians had and operate out through the galaxy with the reptilians taking over planets and slaving the people on the planets. But what all we accomplished was really strange. They have all these UFOs, different types of propulsion that were unbelievable, laser weapon systems, unbelievable stuff. All over the country, Germany and the occupied areas, they had massive underground production facilities that they were using, they had developed for regular arms waste, like tanks and places to build Navy ships and all this kind of stuff. Most of it was underground. So they started expanding those facilities, and they put 11 of these UFO-shaped vehicles in production. So the operatives are trying to explain to us, and the admiral would back off and say, slow down, I don't believe you. And that went on, and then the captains would say the same thing. The operatives were nice guys, and they knew they were going to get the questions when they got back into the admiral's office, and they knew that nobody was going to believe what they said. So fortunately, the admiral had a typist in there, and the admiral's aide was not in there. He wasn't even cleared to be in there. And one or two of the captains, the admiral and myself, and we were the only people that this information was given to by the operatives.
So
Operatives.
So just
Wait, Faust. Let me just say one thing.
okay, go ahead. And then I got one more.
Before we discuss any evidence, I just want to bring up a very just like logical approach to this idea. Okay. Let's assume for one moment that he's right about everything, right? Let's just assume he is.
Yeah.
We're basically so to commit to a program where aliens are giving you advanced weapon technologies. If you were the leader, Faust, would you agree that you would put your smartest scientists into that project? Correct, right?
You mean like if you're Hitler?
Yeah, if you're Hitler, you're introduced the new alien technology. You have to put your smartest guys in to understand and replicate that, right?
Well, here's the thing. Because and this is where it gets confusing, and this is why it's been so I think muddied, because you had Maria Orsic communicating with one faction of these, which I believe weren't so much. I believe they were, what would you call them? They were
subterranean species.
They were subterranean humans. They were basically humans who had gone underground from a previous civilization here on Earth, who had come into this technology.
Sure.
And I believe that they're very Nordic looking. They're kind of known as Nordics. Likely that was one group of people, but I believe that Antarctica is so old and Earth has been around. And if you follow me and you listen to all the crazy things I say, I believe that humans are a hybrid of many ET races, and I think one of those races who stuck their 2 cents in were these reptilians, and so they have some kind of claim in shaping humanity, or I don't think they would be allowed here. But I think that just like the moon and Mars, these places are occupied by more than one species. And it's a free, everyone has free will in this universe. So if you want to go hang out in the reptilian part, it's probably a lot like Earth. You can, I think that there's sections for all these species. Call me crazy.
Okay,
and I think that the reptilians, the Draco, as they're known, were very interested in Hitler because that's their style. And I think that the Nordics were very interested in Maria Orsic because they wanted to advance and adopt and become part of this, but they weren't interested so much in universe domination like Hitler and the Draco.
Sure.
That's so. I don't think Hitler would have been able to. Hitler was kept out of the loop in a lot of ways because they didn't want to weaponize the saucers. It was only after Maria Orsic left they got the plans that they could.
Why didn't they want to weaponize the saucers? They have the greatest technology in the world in the midst of a war.
No. Hitler wanted to, and Himmler and Hitler, they were all about it, but they were kept from it. And then Maria Orsic took the technology and set up shop in Antarctica. Apparently, but Hitler was left with Hitler was left with the leftovers. Apparently, that's what.
Here's my problem with the theory. I won't even try to dispute all the stuff that I consider crazy. Let's assume all of it is real. Let's assume the aliens are real. Let's assume Hitler made deals with them. Let's assume that they're using anti-gravitational perpetual motion technology in the war. If all of that is the case, I have a lot of respect for German scientists, as evidenced with Operation Paperclip, which is when America said, hey, World War II is over. Let's take all these genius Germans who invented bombs and planes and all of this
Rockets,
crazy shit for the Germans.
massive technology, yeah.
Massive technology, military technology, scientific technology. Let's take them, let's absorb them into the US and help them make us money. That happened.
Yeah, that happened.
Just given how smart these guys are, the biggest, common sense logical fallacy to me is if you're gonna make a military tech, you're gonna develop it. And Faust, I didn't know that a part of the narrative was that they didn't use it in war. This kind of puts a crux in this idea. But my whole narrative is just, you don't develop that technology in Antarctica for the simple reason being that all military surveillance and any other operations that you're going to do as a country are going to happen in places that are generally sunny or not freezing with blizzards going on all the time.
Well, it's freaking sub-freezing. Yeah, I mean...
Sub-freezing, right. At the same time, all of those weather conditions put an enormous strain on any sort of engine, flight device. Actually, sure. Let's assume I have no idea about how mythical fantasy anti-gravitational technology works. Sure. The only way I consider myself possibly being wrong is if anti-gravitational technology can avoid all weather and temperature conditions. Sure, I'm wrong. If someone can prove that to me, I will personally serve you for the rest of my life.
You may eat those words in the next few years, but so the way I understand it is, if you can control gravity, you can control time. You can.
Okay, that's true. You have a good point. Yeah,
and density becomes something that is very, very inconsequential. So weight,
if you can freely control gravity, sure,
right? And apparently, even these early devices had this capacity. And I was reading some of the statistics were pretty mind blowing on them.
They could control gravity within a certain space without affecting all other gravity around, up, or under that space.
That's right, because the pilot was unaffected by G-force. So because you could never do. I mean, like if you've ever seen the way a UFO moves, regardless of whether you believe it's being piloted by a little gray man or Joe Smith, either way. You ask any pilot and he'll tell you, if you try to make a turn like that when you're flying, that fast, you're going to end up splat on the windshield.
Physics, yeah.
That's physics. Anybody who would be in a vehicle that can do that has to be protected by some kind of technology that we don't have, that at least the public has no idea about, because or else they would, you'd be unconscious. Your brain would be leaking out your ears. You cannot. I mean, you see the astronauts train. They go through that thing that spins them around. Did you ever see Spies Like Us? Great movie. Chevy Chase, Dan Aykroyd. Anyway, it's crazy. Like, you lose consciousness. Even when they take off to go to space, the astronauts tend to lose consciousness because it's like you cannot, you can't go that fast. The human brain isn't meant to withstand that kind of speed. Anyway,
which is why I want to bring up that for our viewers, if you really dive really deep into this, you'll notice that there's, I believe, 5 authors. I can bring up their names right now, just really quick for everyone. Their names, the specific 2 that are often cited for a lot of these ideas are Matern and Friedrich. They're 2 French authors who took Operation Highjump, who took all of the German expeditions into Antarctica, who took the idea of Hollow Earth, the Vril Society, the Thule Society, and they concocted it all into this book in 1975. I can bring up the name of that book. I believe it was called... I forgot the name of the book. Fuck it. That's not the important part. Them, Friedrich, Stevens, Farrell, and Robert, all authors, kind of spun this narrative together all sold approximately like 600,000 to 800,000 books apiece for their narratives. And those are the narratives that we know and understand on the believer side of this whole argument. And my problem is that if they brought forward definitive evidence, I'd be with you, Faust. I want to believe it. I want to fly in an anti-gravity UFO, and I don't think it's fair that anyone's keeping it from me if that's the case.
Dude, it's not fair to the whole world.
It's not fair to the whole world, but show me the evidence that someone is flying in this thing so I know what to get jealous over.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of evidence coming out right now about we've recovered now. More and more they're saying we've recovered non-terrestrial vehicles.
Okay, that news recently, that is really weird. I have no explanation for it.
So there's this nonsense disclosure going on, which should have been done 100 years ago. Anyway, yeah, and meanwhile, we the public suffer. There's a great documentary just came out called The Lost Century about the reasons for this cover-up, the economic reasons for it, which is the real reason behind any good conspiracy. Don't let anyone tell you differently. It's almost always.
I'm an Arcturian.
People are like, "Yo, you're so naive. The Earth is flat," and I'm like, show me the money in that conspiracy because I don't understand it, okay?
People are like, yo, Nazis went to Antarctica and built bases and got alien technology to make UFOs. And I'm like, show me the evidence.
I'll show you the economic reasons for it. Anyway, so listen, Antarctica. I want to show you. There's Linda Moulton Howe, probably the most veteran, recognized, well-respected investigative reporter to ever focus on these issues. She spent her entire career doing it. So you can say anything you want about her, but she is the top of her field, and she's still going at it. She's unbelievable. And she tends to get a lot of military whistleblowers. Now there's an avenue for military whistleblowers to come forward to Congress and give testimony where they would be protected, at least legally, from violating their contracts and their non-disclosure agreements. But before that, and even now, there's a lot of prosecution going on. I mean, persecution, not prosecution. But this was done. This video I'm going to show you is testimony that was given to her by a Navy SEAL. He doesn't give his real name. He goes by Spartan or something like that. Who was sent to, and you can see this in her documentary called Antarctica: Aliens Under the Ice, I think it's called. And it's basically his testimony about when he was sent there to what's the word when they pull people to pull someone out, and what he saw when he got there. Now, I'm going to show you him first, and then I'm going to go back to the final bit of testimony, which kind of ties all of this together in another way. But let me share my screen real quick, and I'm going to do the clap.
Show us your lies. Show us the deception.
No, I'm just showing you some testimony.
They recently went back. Recently, I say recently, it was in the late 1950s, early 1960s. This coalition that I talk about is Great Britain, United States, France, Germany, Canada, Russia. There has been a space fleet in existence for the last 25 years.
When you say space fleet, who is paying for and operating?
All of this coalition countries.
Can you name the very specific part of Antarctica?
We were held as a blacklist. We were not told the exact location. We were given a latitude, but not a longitude.
That's a Texas.
The compound was in 3 stages, hidden under the ice. Each door was the same, anywhere from 18 feet thick to around 30 feet thick. Did not have standard hinges like what we see today on the door. It's not on a frame to the side. They were on pivots, one at the very top and one at the bottom. And even though these doors were that thick and that heavy, You could take one finger and push them and they would open. There was no resistance whatsoever.
What about the ceilings, hallways, floors?
As far as walking into certain rooms of the lower structures, the light automatically turns on. The walls themselves were anywhere from 18 feet thick to 30 feet thick. And that was from both the base to the ceiling. It was lighted from the inside, but we could not find the source of light. It was a lime green in color.
A lime green?
Yes, ma'am.
What if this room would glow lime green in Antarctica?
The walls themselves looked like it was backlit from the base of the floor or the top of the ceiling. It would look like somebody had put a light under a cabinet to hide the light. You could see the light itself, but you could not see the light fixture. There were no lamps, no bulbs, no wires of any kind. These structures, once you got inside, the outside temperature was at least 40 degrees below zero. Once you stepped inside these structures, the temperature was an ambient 68 to 72 degrees. No outside generators. The people that were there were not heating these structures. They had no means to. They were only there to take photographs, take analysis of the structure, find out what they could.
How much did the man who took the photos say? How big was this facility?
This one facility, there was more than one. The one that we were at stretched almost over 62 acres. The majority of it was under the ice. Ceilings were around 22 to 28 feet in height. The walls were lined with what I call hieroglyphics, but nothing of hieroglyphics that I've ever seen in my life. They did not look Egyptian, they were not Mayan, but they looked similar to both. The only thing that I myself could tell from one of the panels that was on the walls would look like a star map or a star chart.
The door.
The door itself is 17.5 feet wide, 18 feet thick, 23 feet tall.
And that's the one with the black sun carved into it?
Yes, ma'am.
You opened that door.
Who the fuck carved?
All right, guys. Let me be the first to comment on this video. I apologize, Faust. Let's start with this. If you are a documentary filmmaker and you have someone with some crazy thing to say like that guy, you're gonna do one of two things. If he's telling the truth, you're gonna reveal his identity. If he's lying through his teeth, you're gonna hide him behind a silhouette because you're gonna pray to God no one reveals it.
They will not come forward unless you agree to be.
Because who? Who's hunting them? Who's protecting them?
He was a Navy SEAL, Nick.
A Navy SEAL who's revealing Okay. I'm gonna take the believer side of things here. If he's a Navy SEAL and he's protecting his identity, we're assuming that the U.S. military is hiding the existence of aliens and extraterrestrials and these like guarded facilities.
Well, he didn't say that
the North Pole, correct?
He didn't say that on
But
some
that's,
level,
that's
yeah,
the only reason I could think of for him to.
But this is highly compartmentalized. You understand that there's people whose whole job is spent guarding these bases, and they're never allowed in. It's completely.
I don't understand that. I don't think they exist.
Well, you know what I'm saying, though. I'm saying just because we're not saying that if you join the Army or become a Navy SEAL that you learn of these things. He was shocked when he was sent here and what he saw, which is why he eventually, spoke to Linda Moulton Howe. But he speaks of how floored how shocked he was and who he talked to when he got there, the guy who was in charge of bringing back out.
So Faust,
but what is the Black Sun? What is this guy? What is this Texan? Because that's a Texas accent.
It is
110%.
It is.
What does he know about the Black Sun? What does he
Nothing.
seem like? He's not writing a book. He's
No,
not,
he's
what is
not.
his
He's a
motivation?
liar.
You know what I mean? Oh, he's just a
He's
pathological
he's a
liar
pathological liar.
who doesn't want credit for his lies.
So I have something very interesting. Faust, would you agree that a lot of the evidence and ideas we have in America around these bases was brought forward by I'm sorry. Not William Tompkins. I'm sorry. It was brought forward by, what's his name? Cooper Stein.
Oh, Cooper Stein. Yeah, Cooper Stein. So I'm going to get into Cooper Stein.
Let's get into Cooper Stein.
So Linda Moulton Howe, also, and so Cooper Stein's, his story is fascinating. So he was a CIA agent, and he spoke to Linda Moulton Howe. He also spoke to Richard Dolan. He went on record and spoke to them. And,
actually, yeah, true.
And his story is interesting because, let me find the link. Damn, my contacts. I'm used to wearing my glasses. I'm not used to wearing. Let me find the link right here. Here it is. Okay. So this is what and I'm going to let you guys hear this because you need to hear this guy's voice to be able to hear and gauge. I don't want to prejudice you and tell you what I think of it, but hearing his testimony for me was like pretty mind blowing. So apparently, according to him, he briefed Eisenhower and Nixon in 1959 about UFOs, and there were some other topics they discussed. And he goes through great length, and he because his CIA boss and Dwight Eisenhower and Nixon, they were all there. It was in Washington. Linda does her thing. She goes through and gets as much detail as she can, to try to ascertain what is true. And so I saved this clip for you guys to listen to because it's a phenomenal kind of. This is from a 3-day interview that he did with Linda Moulton Howe in his Florida home. It was in June of 1998 when he was doing this, and he was doing this because he was in poor health. And he didn't want to, he had never written a book, and he didn't want to die with all these extraordinary secrets. So he contacted Linda, and he gave this series of interviews. He was supposed to give them on video, but I think he got sicker and it didn't work out. But I want to jump right into that and let you hear what he says, because it incredibly, in my opinion, lines up with everything I've been saying. And let's just go for it. I'm going to let you hear it. This guy, he had a few different anonymous names. Again, he was coming out when there was no protection for whistleblowers like there is as of February of last year. All right, so just take a listen to this, okay? I'm going to start 4 minutes in to get to the good stuff.
No, he was not there.
Eisenhower, Nixon are sitting here talking about paperwork. What happened?
Eisenhower, he asked the FBI people, do you have much material? And they said that they had a reasonably good stack to go over. And they asked us what we had, and we said that we really didn't have much. At that time, we probably had 10 or a dozen cases to cover. And he said, we're taking you first. Come forward and show us what you have. So we brought the suitcase out.
It's Anthony and you, only
Yes.
from the CIA?
Yes. And we opened it up, laid it down on the floor, and took out the big folder we had everything in it, and then laid out all the photographs. And that's when the first photograph I showed him was the Argentine one. And I said, this looks like a Homnivoo 2 German craft. And Eisenhower said, I think you're right. And that's when Nixon looked at Eisenhower, looked at me, and just sort of looked totally stunned. So I have a feeling that Eisenhower kept Nixon out of the loop. When I mentioned the German craft, Eisenhower did not question it, so he already had known about the German space program, who knows how long before.
Did Anthony say anything?
Anthony said, yes, I agree, this resembles the German crafts from Argentina.
And Eisenhower doesn't pick up on this and talk about, do we know anything more?
The only thing he said was, we have ships down in the area. The CIA have any knowledge about how many of these crafts are being reported coming out of Argentina? And we gave them that report that we had gotten, that our naval vessels had radar screen contacts of saucers coming in from outer space and going into around the crest to the South Polar regions, and also coming in and down into the Argentine area.
This is Eisenhower saying it.
That was part of the report that we had, and that we had radar contacts.
When you said that,
Eisenhower says that is to be expected. We expected this. It's something he was already familiar with. You may have gotten a report from CIA headquarters on something like that when it first came out.
or from the National Security Council,
Yeah.
from the Majestic 12 people.
Yeah, everything that was reported always mentioned Majestic 12.
Did Eisenhower ever reference Majestic 12?
Yes. At one time, we were looking at the different photographs, and he mentioned he had told Nixon, this looks familiar. It was an aerial shot over the Netherlands, he said. Contact Majestic on this, he said. Verify if this is the very same thing that they had sent 3 months ago.
And did Nixon respond?
Yeah, he said, okay, I'll do this.
Did anybody ever explain why Majestic, why the term Majestic?
We knew it was a term for the original people that were digging into the flying saucer episodes.
It sounds like there were parallel tracks of intelligence, and that Majestic would have been working through the NSC.
Yeah.
CIA would have been doing its intelligence, the FBI doing its intelligence, the Army, the Air Force, the Navy, and that all these parallel tracks, and sometimes investigating each other. And I know the Navy has tried to get into CIA files. I've talked with a man who said how hard they tried and how they were blocked. Did Eisenhower in that meeting say anything about an understanding about whether or not he was perceiving that there was ally or threat or any interpretation?
No. In fact, Nixon said that Eisenhower had just told him that we're not gaining enough ground on this thing, that we need new blood, especially the Air Force.
Did Eisenhower in this meeting in the spring of 1959, is that when he said that he didn't understand why no one was getting to the bottom?
That was a quote. I had mentioned earlier that it was Nixon that said Ike is really disappointed in this thing, and that he said that we need new blood involved in this thing to try to move it along, because we're not really accomplishing that much. And he said that was Ike's word, and then when we walked out, the Air Force colonel had said to us, boy, it looks like I'm out of a job.
Is Eisenhower saying anything with impatience, with anger, with anything that would give insight that he had any sense of whether there was hostility, any interpretation given at that meeting about these crafts and these beings?
The only thing he asked us is, do you have any pictures with aliens similar to what you had before and everything? And we told him no, that we did not have anything with aliens. I think we sat there about 15 minutes with him. He looked at all of them, and we told him that all the interviews that we had overseas with people that had taken the pictures, we had this one picture we showed him that was from Holland, where this thing hovered over this little town area.
Triangle.
No, that was the round one. And that it eventually started going up and then just darted and shot away at high speed. But he mentioned alien saucer.
There has been a story that has floated for years that Eisenhower went to see one of the live beings in California, and that it was covered on his daily travel schedule as going to a dentist, but that he actually went to see a being somewhere in China Lake.
I never saw anything like that, any material like that, or
he denies.
any word.
He's lying. Even aliens want to come to California.
I think it gives him more credibility.
Alien, whatever he might have done.
Did Nixon say anything specifically at that meeting in April?
No, very, very little. He said, in your FBI report, is there anything unusual in that would be interesting to CIA as far as looking for unusual type of crafts overseas. And then they told us that they had a lot of sightings. They said we have some
right, I'm gonna
abductions.
kill
No,
it.
they
They
didn't.
said that? The FBI?
Yeah,
No.
we were investigating
Bullshit.
abductions that claim that they were up
Stop
in the
lying
saucer
to
and
them.
came
They're
back.
saying what they're investigating.
No.
Anyway, there you have it,
All right,
ladies and
pause it,
gentlemen.
Faust. This is
I
the
guarantee you,
credibility.
this man was
This is
discredited,
the
and
due
they made his
diligence that your
credentials
evidence
disappear.
is dealing with.
No, that's not true. Everybody who's up knows. Look, you see, well, I don't know if you're still sharing the screen, but you see where it says Bob Lazar is truthful. You know, but well, for 20 years they denied Bob Lazar ever worked. They got rid of all his records.
He's
They
still alive.
yeah, I know, but I'm saying they made him disappear when his testimony came out. They said there's no record of him working here. We have no record of Bob Lazar, and they
That's
made
pretty
him
normal.
until finally, you know, they got a hold of someone who worked there, and he was like, "Yeah, what do you mean? I worked with Bob." You know, nobody gave him the memo that he was supposed to make Bob disappear too, and I'm sure that would
Touche.
happen with this guy.
Touche.
You know, so it's not necessarily the end all be all just because they made this guy's credentials disappear.
And I give Faust a lot of credit for that. To all the believers out there, we have to always keep in mind that should any of these crazy ideas that we can't even fathom be real, we have to realize the government is doing everything in their power to keep them under the wraps. And we won't have a body of evidence ever. But this isn't one of those times.
Maybe not, maybe. But look, I mean, I just think that the fact that he was on his deathbed, it's just a little strange for people to be
He
fabricating
wasn't.
stories.
That was also a lie as a part of an article. He died like 5 years after it.
But you just heard Richard Dolan say that he looked like he was going to die.
Of course, we also heard Richard Dolan say that he interviewed a man who he didn't trust outright, but he still put it on his record of his career. Richard Dolan proved to me that he is a source of misinformation who cannot be trusted. He proved to me that his whole career is full of shit. He wasted his life writing fiction and selling it to you, the viewer, as truth.
So interesting that that Cooper said he saw the Hannibal and that it was recognized. So the last thing I want to share with you guys is there. So a lot of stuff came out later about the Black Sun, and you know, you see that insignia, which was still on a lot of Ukrainian soldiers' arms up until 2019, I think, when they were like, "You're gonna have to take them off if we're gonna be sending you money." That's neither here nor there. But the Black Sun, it's just fascinating that that's what this Texan Navy SEAL who allegedly was sent there saw on the door. It's fucking strange that what that he would put that together. This is not a guy, clearly you can hear him speak, who what I'm sure is studying alternative history when he's not Navy SEAling. Anyway, so there's two things. What, you know, Operation Highjump. we just have to cover a little bit because it culminates with Highjump and then Paperclip, which, you know, we're gonna lose you guys soon. I know, because we've been going for a while. But Operation Highjump was according to the government, was a science expedition that for some reason we're supposed to believe was led by the Naval Military Expedition by Rear Admiral Byrd, who was a higher up naval officer, and he took 4,700 military personnel, 6 helicopters, 6 Martin PBM flying boats, 2 seaplane tenders, and 15 other aircraft, 13 U.S. Navy support ships, and 1 aircraft carrier,
and
the
2
USS Philippine
icebreakers.
Sea, and 2 icebreakers, to go on a science expedition in 1947, according to the government. I'm not in the habit of believing a lot of what the government says.
And I agree with you. It was a military expedition, pure and straight out.
It seems like it was a military expedition. Now, after they were supposed to stay for, I don't know, how many months, Nick?
Like, allegedly 8 months.
8 months allegedly. They were prepared to, and they were back in 8 weeks. And there's the official reasons why they came back so soon have been muddied. The waters are very muddy there.
They're
is
not
well known that they did
4,700
not come
people.
back with nearly the amount of ships they went with.
Obviously. Dude, we sent 5,000 people to Antarctica when no one had visited before. How do you expect for that to go 100% right? Of course we lose ships. Of course we lose people.
Yes.
It's Antarctica.
So on the way back, it's worth noting that before the United States could hush Byrd, as they do so well, and discredit him and make him shut up for the rest of his life, he spoke to a South American newspaper, a 1947 edition of El Mercurio. I don't know how to say that right now.
No, you're right. Give us the grossly mistranslated version.
So the translated version that I have says, and I'll show you a picture of the article in case you question whether it actually exists or not.
In case you don't speak Spanish.
It says Admiral Richard E. Byrd refers to the strategic importance of the poles. What follows are translated passages from the original Spanish release. It says Admiral Richard E. Byrd warned today of the necessity for the United States to adopt protective measures against the possibility of an invasion of the country by hostile aircraft proceeding from the polar regions. The Admiral said, quote, "I do not want to scare anybody, but the bitter reality is that in the event of a new war, the United States will be attacked by aircraft flying in from over one or both poles." This specific passage is the source of the original theory that proposed that the North and South poles were being used as locations where a new enemy existed capable of initiating war. The reference to a new war clearly indicates that the entity involved was both hostile in Byrd's perception and powerful, since apparently it can threaten mainland America from pole to pole. The article continues and says, quote, "On the subject of the recently terminated expedition, Byrd said that the most important of the observations and discoveries made were the present potential situation as it relates to the security of the United States. I can do no more than warn my countrymen very forcibly that the time has passed when we could take refuge in complete isolation and rest in confidence in the guarantee of security which distance, the oceans, and the poles provide." That's the translation I have, and it's pretty fucking telling.
And Faust, you are completely right. So, guys, I give Faust a lot of respect. There's two believer narratives to that quote. One of them is a grossly mistranslated version, which alleges that Byrd made an insinuation that there were vehicles that were flying from North Pole to South Pole at breaknecking speeds. That one is fake. Faust actually read you the exact real historical translation to that quote.
Right.
No BS. My one counterpoint to it is it never alleges UFO, aliens, or anything in that regard.
No,
so here's my explanation for the reason, for the reasoning for that voyage. I think that a lot of the narratives, a lot of the newspapers, a lot of the historical articles you'll find will try to make it seem like this was a mysterious voyage. But it wasn't. There were 11 of the top reporters in the entire world. Reporters from the top newspapers of every major editorial country in the world on this ship. I actually, you know what? I even saved how many words they sent in total. During their time on the ship, they sent 478,338 words worth of testimony of this trip to news reporters. This wasn't even secret. This wasn't top secret. It wasn't even secret. It was actually a very disclosed voyage. We got 3 volumes and over 900 pages of military text disclosing exactly what happened. Operation Highjump was an operation where we got our military there. We wanted to test, hey, how well do our planes work? How well do our clothes protect us? How well do our vehicles work? How well do our supplies work? Can we survive? Can we make a tent? Can we make a base? Can we launch a rocket? The idea was that the Russians were getting really powerful and they had the potential to invade America using the Arctic, using Antarctica as a leeway point. And America thought that they would face a giant war in the Arctic region. Byrd was adamant about this. He dedicated to his life to telling America, hey, we have to get out here. We have to prepare. And what ended up happening is one of the icebreakers was super late. Everyone was super late to this whole mission. No one expected that the cold and the winds and the blizzards would provide such resistance. And when they did, what ended up happening is everyone was just unprepared. They said, hey, let's end this trip like freaking 3 months early. None of our planes are working. None of our clothes is working. None of our ships are working. Let's head back out. And Byrd spent the last of his life telling everyone, you're wrong. The Russians are going to attack. The Germans are going to attack. But they never did. And that was Operation Highjump. An operation to try to prepare us for a war that never happened.
I don't know, man.
That's my opinion. I respect every other narrative. Faust is rolling a joint. He is embedding his credibility right now.
This is a celebratory.
He celebrates every loss as if he's a Frenchman, guys.
Vast victorious believers versus skeptics. So listen, before we go, guys, there's a couple things that we didn't get to that if you're interested in this subject and you've made it this long with us, some really interesting stuff worth checking out. One of which is I found on a website called it's called mysterioushollowearth.webs.com, and it's just some really interesting. There's some documentation there about, there's a declassified CIA document that was written about a Hitler sighting in Colombia, and a picture taken. And apparently the CIA agent was a pretty higher up respected guy, and which is why it was filed. And there's an actual picture of Hitler in 1963. Because apparently they got him out. I never really believed that until I read this. Actually, I never really believed they got Hitler out. But it's fascinating. The CIA actually has a letter from one of their agents. And so this was declassified. These documents were declassified in October of 2017. And they contained a new batch of documents about the Kennedy conspiracy assassination, and included, I don't think they realized, reports of Hitler visiting Colombia and Argentina. And the reports in one document, a former Nazi SS stormtrooper confirmed he reported having met with Hitler while visiting Colombia in 1955, which is crazy, but that's on that website. And I'll include that.
Faust, pause.
I'm paused. Go ahead.
Guys, let me debunk Faust real quick. In 1945, 2 months after the German surrender and after Hitler killed himself, a U-boat 530, visited Argentina. They were not welcomed. Nobody wanted them there. They're like, hey, you guys surrendered. Why are you even hanging out here? They arrived. A Hungarian immigrant named Spazo, S-B-A-Z-O. Look this up right now, guys. He wrote an article that said Hitler and all of his compatriots escaped to Argentina. He's the only mention. I will pay you $1,000 if you find me another mention of this fact before Spazo. It did not exist. No, this random immigrant said, hey, Hitler escaped to Germany. Everyone is here. More writers started writing about it, about 5 or 6 of them. This whole conspiracy started, and that's where this comes from.
Maybe.
Hitler never escaped to Germany. He blew his own head out in Germany. He never got to Argentina. All the South American stuff is a lie. And Colombia, I love your women, but I hate your deception. Stop this.
It's not, well, they didn't do it. Someone else did. So listen, last thing. Guys, remember about the Arctic Treaty, okay, and 1959, and when you start to study the work of Dr. Michael Salla, and you learn about all the different secret space programs that have popped up, basically from this progeniting space program that the Germans started, including our own, and interestingly enough, Antarctica. I was just curious, so I went on WikiLeaks, and I typed in Antarctica, and I found this document. I want to share my screen with you guys.
I cannot debunk this, guys. This is fact.
It's really interesting.
Very interesting.
It's just shocking to me the way they talk about Antarctica and the way that they make sure that everybody knows that you're not allowed to talk about Antarctica.
It's very strange,
and it's like almost like they're hiding something. I don't know.
And I fully support Faust on that. It legitimately looked like they're hiding like heavy duty military operations with the language they were using and what Faust is about to show you guys.
So that's worth showing too. Let me just share my screen real quick.
Because guys, realize if an Arctic war is to start, if any of this is legitimate, they don't want us to know. They don't want us talking about it. So I personally consider WikiLeaks a very legitimate source of information. And when Faust brought this up to me, I couldn't explain it. I couldn't find any explanation. This is weird. This is really weird, guys.
It is our view, which is shared by the other treaty signatories, that's the treaty that guy was talking about, that any direct UN involvement in Antarctica, even by its subsidiary bodies, could greatly complicate the existing cooperation there among the treaty parties. Furthermore, and more immediate concern, the treaty parties have agreed not to raise the question of Antarctica in the LOS conference and hope that it will not be raised by others. Judicial problems in the Antarctic Treaty could be greatly exasperated if the Antarctic seabed question is raised at the conference currently in session. Even something as innocent as a discussion of Antarctica at the UNEP General Council meeting could flag the issue at the LOS with possibly grave results for confidential.
And that's super weird. I completely
goes
agree with
on
you,
and on like that, and it's
Yeah.
just like, listen, under no circumstances, basically, this document says, is anybody to bring up fucking Antarctica, and if anybody does bring it up, this is what we have to say and squash it. And I'm just like, damn, you know what I mean? Like, it's a simple page that made it into WikiLeaks, but it
and my
speaks to
only
what they're
explanation, Faust, is I thought that our government was basically assuming that if a nation were to overcome the element of cold with their technology in the future, that by including that in official United Nations like legislature, they would be able to protect themselves from that incident.
Could be, yeah.
It could be. And I totally agree with you that it completely could insinuate that certain military, like strategic points currently exist there. Yeah. It also insinuates that if anyone were to try to establish military points there, that the U.S. currently at this very moment looks at that as a threat, and that area in general is a very dangerous strategic point.
It's so very
totally
important. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very important. Definitely.
Because it's rare. They're like, listen, just to remind everyone, you're not allowed to talk about that at all. But anyway,
sure.
I'll include links to everything that we didn't cover for everyone who's interested in these topics. Nick, fantastic job. This was a great great debate. I think we presented a lot of great information.
I think it was fun.
And it was a good time. Great show. And thanks to everyone who stayed with us. Check out the video description for more links. And let us know in the comments what you think of this episode, and what if you think that I'm crazy with my theories about secret space programs and reptiles, or if you think that Nick is onto something with his classic debunking style, and we'll go from there. Thank you guys again for joining us. Nick, you the man.
Guys, one last thing. 1930s, 1940s, any data side, the Soviets and the Russians are the greatest race in history. I myself was born a Russian. I know we're geniuses. I know that we were born with such superior intellect to the rest of the world that it's almost hard to fathom the accomplishments of the Russians. I want you guys to know that anything Faust insinuated today that was possible because of Russian intervention, aliens, greater intelligence, I agree that it's fully possible. I don't agree that it happened, but it's fully possible because the might and power of Russians is greater above all else. Have a great night, everyone.
On that note, God bless America. Thanks, guys. Talk soon. Appreciate you. Bye-bye.